The water rose early in the morning to leave parks and streets part hidden by flooding around the centre of Hereford. Yet another case study in the story of the unrelenting February storms. Here they're having to take a paramedic by boat into a stranded neighbourhood. They know all about flooding here, but rarely on this scale.
So what we're doing now is we're sending boats out to go and rescue people, which we've done since first thing this morning. So we've made approximately about 20 to 25 rescues so far.
How many of the residents have been moved out?
There's a lot of people that have been moved out. There's not very many people left, really. They've been brilliant, the emergency services, up and down constantly all day. Really, really good. Can't thank these people enough.
And so in increasingly familiar flood-induced choreography, more churches and leisure centres are turned into temporary shelters. The Environment Agency said in places the River Wye had reached its highest level since records began 200 years ago.
It's the worst I've ever seen it. Ever since I've been here, and I've been running around this place for 3 donkey's years.
In Worcestershire, police searching for a 55-year-old woman missing after being swept into floodwater by the river team said this evening they'd found a body. By mid-morning, more than 500 flood alerts and warnings covered much of England, following a record number the day before. This was the scene in Guildford in Surrey. And with more flooding came more criticism of the UK government response. Today, the Environment Minister said they were committing billions of pounds to flood defences.
The flood infrastructure that we have in place, the flood defence infrastructure, has worked as expected and has protected around 20,000 homes in this particular incident. I know that's no comfort at all, obviously, to the 400 homes that have been flooded.
So the emergency operations are continuing this evening in Hereford, but in other parts of the UK which bore the brunt of the weekend storms, it's the aftermath they're now having to deal with. Particularly in South Wales. We found business after business immersed in the wreckage of the weekend.
Bit of damage here.
Phil Thomas shows us his microbrewery, still spewing floodwater. This image from the police helicopter shows the scale of the flooding they encountered on just this one industrial estate.
I came in, walked in through the door with my wife and 2 kids, and I was in tears. I was in tears. You know, I've been here for 5 years, building up the business slowly but surely, and you know, in one evening there's £10,000 worth of damage, or perhaps more.
The First Minister of Wales, a few miles away in Pontypridd, knows there's also major infrastructure damage beyond the chaos at street level, where for some residents it's still a struggle to access their properties.
And it's just not shifting, is it?
And those who have are left in despair.
Obviously it's come up to the 6 foot on the wall and absolutely devastated.
Kerry Loveridge woke up on the sofa surrounded by water. Like others, she feels warnings could have been clearer.
Gutted, devastated and all cried out. I am angry, very angry. As you can see, we are literally going to be out of this house for, it's going to be about 6 months, if not longer.
And now here it's Plaid Cymru accusing a Labour government of underinvestment in flood defences. Some are asking questions about whether your government has got a grip on this issue.
Well, no government could have predicted what happened here over the weekend. This government will spend £350 million in this Assembly term alone on flood defences in Wales.
Back in Hereford, the flood levels are now slowly receding. But in neighbouring Worcestershire, the threat of rising water remains, as we enter yet another night of people being told to leave their homes.
Well, Greyfriars Avenue here is usually a pretty pleasant place to live, just yards from the town centre and not far from the River Wye. But with that river at its highest level in 200 years, people living here on a floodplain have had to leave, grabbing what they can of their belongings. I spent the afternoon with one family ferried back to check on their home by their neighbour and volunteer flood warden. This quiet little cul-de-sac in Hereford is today a backwater in all senses of the word. Storm Dennis took the River Wye at the bottom of the street to record high levels.
And householders like teaching assistant Lydia Williams have been forced from their homes.
For me, it was just so overwhelming. So obviously last time our house didn't get flooded, it just missed out on it. But as soon as me and my mum saw it coming in and went back to sleep, and then we woke up to all our downstairs underwater, just so shocked.
Neighbour and volunteer flood warden Colin Taylor is steering us past the floating detritus to the house where Lydia's lived with her parents for 6 years. He's never seen anything like this.
98 was the biggest flood.
Was it worse than this?
No, that was the biggest flood or second biggest highest flood on record. This is outrageous by over a foot of water.
If you go there, then you'll be on top, you'll be high up.
Lydia's mum didn't want to make the journey back because she was too upset to see the damage flooding has done to the home they'd lovingly renovated. A new kitchen completed just 4 months ago.
That crashed over in the middle of the night, didn't it?
It was this morning. That toppled over and started floating, so you can feel how soggy that is.
Yeah.
In the dining room there's more devastation. A sodden mess of photo albums, the memories within in danger of being washed clean away.
You can see all your family belongings will just vanish like that.
And something like photos is irreplaceable, isn't it?
Precious to you. It's very overwhelming and just a massive shock. Yeah, it's really emotional.
Back on dry land we meet Lydia's mum, Lindsay.
So we just went back with Lydia. Tell us why you didn't want to come back.
Well, it's the first time it's ever flooded and it's the first time I've been in this situation, so I just thought if I went back now it would probably really upset me, because it's still a bit of a shock to think that I'm not going home tonight to sit on my sofa.
This street was built on a floodplain in the 1930s. When Lydia's family bought it, they knew it was a risk, but until last night it had never flooded so badly. It'll be months before they can return their home to some semblance of normality. Now they're wondering if this is the new normal.
Well, joining me now is Mark Garnier, the MP for Wyre Forest, a neighbouring constituency which has flooded in the past, and the Reverend Ruth Hulse, who's the Church of England's Dean for the Hereford area. Mark Garnier first. The River Wye here is at its highest level since records began, clearly unprecedented. What do you want the government to do, more than it's already doing, to protect people here and in your constituency?
Well, the good news is in my constituency, actually going back as far as Tony Blair's government, they brought in some demountable flood barriers in Bewdley, and that type of approach is incredibly good. One of the important things I think we are promising is an extra £4 billion spent over the next 5 years. And what I think we want to see... On flood defences. And I think what we want to see is more of this type of demountable flood defences that can come in. But where you can't do the demountable flood defences, you want to have property level defences. So there's lots of different ways you can approach it. And I think taking a sort of cohesive approach to this is the way forward.
Would you like the Prime Minister to visit here, and would that help?
Actually, I don't think it would. What I really want is George Eustice to carry on doing the job he's doing.
He's the Environment Secretary.
He's the Environment Secretary. I had Rebecca Power in my patch yesterday, who's the Floods Minister. So she came up to see what was going on. It's great having the Prime Minister. It looks good on telly, but do you know what? I'd rather he kept out of the way while the Environment Agency did their stuff.
It'd be a liability.
Well, I wouldn't like to say that.
But should he convene COBRA, though, given how many people have been forced out of their homes? This is an extraordinary situation.
I don't know whether you should convene COBRA or not. I mean, I've, as a minister, sat in on a couple of COBRA meetings over things which were substantially bigger than this. Look, maybe. But how you deliver the stuff is not about how you hold the meeting. It's actually what you do on the ground. And the Environment Agency, I would keep repeating, is doing a fantastic job. As, by the way, is Jessie Norman, who's a local MP here.
The Environment Secretary said that the government couldn't protect everybody. We're standing here on a floodplain. Is it time to acknowledge that parts of this constituency, parts of your constituency, will in future be uninhabitable?
I wouldn't say as far as uninhabitable. I mean, I think one of the things we need to look at, and actually looking at these houses, I mean, the first thing I'd say is how unbelievably disruptive and awful it is for the people who live here. But at some point they're going to have to repair their houses. You know, maybe we need to start thinking about when you put the house back into working order, actually you do it in a way where the ground floor can be, cleaned out relatively easy, so you don't have carpets, you don't have soft furnishings on the ground floor. Maybe we need to just change the way we live in order to be able to adapt to these types of climate changes.
Let me bring in the Reverend Ruth Hulse now. We've just touched there on the sort of human suffering this is causing, and I saw it this afternoon as well. What are you grabbing from your parishioners about how they're coping with this?
I've been astounded by the community spirit that's come out, actually, that neighbours are looking after neighbours and all the different agencies are working together. So I've been in contact with local councillors and fire and rescue teams and, as I said, neighbours and residents and churches, and they're all working together to try and provide safety and warm, dry places for these people who have had horrendous experiences with these floods, second time in a matter of months. And it's been great to see the community spirit, but under such awful circumstances.
Do you think you're getting enough help from the government here and from the authorities more broadly?
It's a very difficult question, that is. And I think the local council have done quite a lot for flood defences, and they've certainly been out, and we've seen all the fire and rescue teams doing their very best. I think it's really difficult to know what else they could do, how much more they could invest in here. It would be great that if this didn't have to happen again. So certainly if there was a way that could happen, more money, more investment would be great.
Would you like the Prime Minister to come?
I think I would have to agree that actually the presence would look great, but actually doing something would be far greater and far more significant here.
Now, the Church of England has been pretty outspoken on climate change recently, setting a target for net zero emissions of 2030, which is well before the government. Why is the Church taking a lead on this?
I think we have to. I think the church has something to say about creation and about caring for the planet and the surroundings and for people as well. And so we have to make a stand, and it's all very well just talking about it, but you've actually got to do something, haven't you? And so that's why they've set this target. And so we're seeing eco-churches popping up all over the place to try and do something to say, actually, this is an important issue for everybody and for us, and we need to start acting now.
What are eco-churches?
Eco-churches are churches that are trying to reduce their carbon footprint, so they try and use more reusable and recyclable things, solar panels, all those steps that are out there already, but we're trying to bring them together just to try and say this is an important issue to us.
Would you like the government to be more ambitious on its carbon emissions targets?
Oh yes, yeah.
Well, let me put that back to you, Mark Garnier. Do you think the government has got to really step up now on the climate change, take this much more seriously than it has been?
I've taken recently to meeting with a group of climate change activists in my constituency, and actually it's fascinating talking to people who really feel passionate about this. I certainly think we need to spend a lot more time listening to them. I think there are a huge amount of climate changes that are happening, confronting us, and we need to tackle this head on.
But is there the sense of urgency in the government?
I think the way we're moving back on things like electric cars, I mean, it was originally 2040, then it was now it's 2032. There is a genuine change, and also look, bear in mind, I mean, it was a Conservative government that introduced, the kind of the subsidy for unleaded petrol, and it was one of my predecessors who brought in the Clean Air Act in 1956, I think. So there has been quite a lot going on from Conservative governments, one way or the other. But look, I do think.
But the Church is saying 2030 target. The government says 2050. Is that going to come forward?
It may have to. I mean, I think we need to bring all of the population with us. There are an awful lot of people who are very, very committed to this, and really sympathetic with their views, but not everybody is. And I think it's a process of the government needs to encourage more and more people to feel passionately about this, and that's the way the government can get these things done faster. It's everybody working together.
Mark Garnier, Reverend Ruth Holes, thank you very much for joining us in your wellies out here. Thank you. Well, other areas across the country have been feeling the effects of Storm Dennis. The Army was brought into parts of Yorkshire over the weekend to help with flood defences. And on the whole, those measures seem to have worked. In York today, with the River Ouse rising, it was feared there might be flooding. But it's a city with significant defences and well used to coping. Our North of England correspondent Claire Fallon is there for us now. Claire.
Right now, it is not easy to tell what is normally the River Ouse and what is normally solid land, but at the bottom of this slope, I reckon the water's got to be about 6 foot deep. Of course, most of York is not underwater, and they are pretty used to dealing with flooding here. That constant sloshing noise that you can probably hear is the water being pumped out from the pub down there, and it's something that they've done time and time again over the years. And once the water level drops, the reality is within a few days they'll be open and serving pints again. But not everywhere has had the investment in flood defences that they've had here. Go back to the widespread flooding across much of the north at the back end of last year, and then the Prime Minister said it was not a national crisis. So is this now a national crisis after the second big storm in as many weeks, with hundreds of homes having been flooded. That's what I asked Craig McGarvey from the Environment Agency when I spoke to him earlier today.
Right now we're dealing with this flooding situation and this is a better situation than it was last weekend. The national issue is how we deal with climate change in the future and make sure that we are looking at innovative solutions to manage increasingly stormy weather.
So let me put this a different way. Should there be a COBRA meeting to deal with what we're facing at the moment?
We're making sure that government are well briefed. We've been briefing the Secretary of State and the Secretary of State has been up to Yorkshire this weekend to look at the issues and is well briefed.
The Prime Minister hasn't been to anywhere affected by flooding though, has he?
And our job is just to make sure that we are briefing government and we're briefing them well, and government are providing us with support in terms of investment. They're investing £2.6 billion between 2015 and 2021 to better protect 300,000 homes.
Isn't there a reality that where you build big barriers to try and protect some homes, the water simply comes out somewhere else and floods other homes?
When we build flood defences, we make sure that we don't cause flooding elsewhere, and if it is going to cause problems, we make sure we build defences to protect those places, but we make sure we don't cause more flooding elsewhere. As we deal with this climate emergency, we are going to have to look at some tougher choices. We can build flood defences, we can't just keep building bigger and bigger flood defences across the whole of the country. We need to look at slowing the flow of the water into our rivers, and in some places we might have to look at not being able to defend communities and either design the houses so they can be flooded and cleared out quickly and get back to normal, or it might not be possible to protect all of those communities in the future.
So you save some and sacrifice others?
No, I think it's just as we deal with the climate emergency, we're going to have tougher and tougher choices and conversations about what we can and can't protect. It just might not be possible in every place across the country to protect every home.
So what would you say today to the people in Hereford who are waist deep in water, to the people in Mythenroyd who only a few days ago were flooded yet again because the defences there haven't been completed yet?
Well, first of all, our hearts go out to every family, every business that's been flooded. It's a terrible situation to deal with. We will keep investing in flood defences there to try and reduce the risk of flooding, but I emphasise we are reducing the risk. We can't take the risk away completely.